Welcome to the Gestalt IT On-Premise podcast, the show that dares to be both on topic or on premise. And yes, this week, on premises. We are here in beautiful, fabulous Las Vegas, and I have gathered together a group of luminaries to discuss a single topic. This week, the premise is the relevance of hardware. Effectively, is hardware relevant? Is it not relevant? You know, I think it still is. Before we get started with that, though, let's meet who's on the panel. Joep.
Hey, I'm Joep Piscaer, TLA Tech. I'm an analyst. I'm an influencer, for lack of a better term, and I do all kinds of techie stuff.
Hey, I'm Mortillaro. I'm a storage analyst at GigaOM, and I'm co-owner at TechInPlat.
So Steve McDowell, founder and chief analyst at NAND Research. Cover all things kind of enterprise infrastructure, but a particular focus on storage.
And I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day and publisher of Gestalt IT. So we have all been in IT a little bit of time, and we have watched that sort of pendulum swing between specialty hardware and commodity hardware. I feel like hardware still matters. You look at the all the announcements that are being made now that Sapphire Rapids is out. You look in the cloud, and you look at all the excitement about the next generation AI processor, TPUs, the next generation CPUs, all the people talking about the move to ARM. Hardware absolutely still matters, or does it? Joep?
So I don't agree, actually.
Okay.
So I used to love hardware. My background is in data centers. I loved my servers. I loved my storage. However, the last, 5 years, I've been working with organizations that have been building out developer capabilities. I have yet to talk to a single person that actually cares about hardware. They still care about Kubernetes, they still care about cloud, they still need it, but they're not talking about it. And they just expect this stuff to be abstracted away.
Yeah, I think to jump on what you said, I kind of disagree with that point of view, but I think it's based on the persona you're talking to. If you're talking to a developer, we are talking at a higher level of abstraction to the hardware, right? So they are looking at running their stuff. They don't really care about the service. They expect the service, which comes down at the lower level, to be reliable and so on. But ultimately, someone has to own that and to provide a storage platform which is reliable, which provides the performance, the SLA that you need, and that is hopefully optimized, right? So we're talking about core data services, the duplication, compression, reliability, and in a way, you also need to think about the key characteristics of the platform, right? So you want it to be efficient. So you need to consider storage density. You need to be sure that it uses the media properly, and you also want it to be providing you the best capacity at the best dollar price per gigabyte, right? So that's my kind of take on that.
I don't think it matters to the IT buyer. An IT buyer is buying an experience. He wants certain SLAs, he wants certain capabilities. He's going to trust his vendor. I think it matters very much in the storage world still to the vendors, right? It's the way that Pure Storage is going to get QLC down to the price of hard drives by building their own flash modules. And we're in the age of accelerators, and we're starting to see that with compression, with ransomware detection. It goes on and on.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because maybe the question is wrong. I think that hardware will always still matter 100%, because there will always be hardware advances, and there will always be specialty hardware, and there will always be new instruction sets and things like that. But I guess more to the point, who does it matter to? And what I'd like to do is kind of take it in the direction of, okay, if it doesn't matter to the end users, because I agree, end users should not be thinking about speeds and feeds. They should not be thinking, how many cores does my network switch have? That is insane. What they should be thinking about is, does it meet my needs? Is it supportable? Is it reliable? Will I be able to continue using it as my needs change? That sort of thing. And if the answer is yes, it doesn't matter whether it's proprietary or commodity. It doesn't matter whether it's a next generation or past generation. But to the ISVs, the people designing those products, I'm going to say that, yeah, it matters, because essentially I'm a little worried about this whole commodity hardware move, because I'm worried that it's not going to be good enough to give us those, basically the next wave of products, if everything is just a freaking PC.
Yeah, maybe to jump on what you said, it goes down to what are you, first of all, what you're expecting. So the experience part is important. I do agree to that. But on the other hand, if we are using an optimized hardware, and on top of that, we're running an optimized application, because I don't know for you guys, but I'm yet to see an application which is, optimized to run at the best performance ever, especially the more abstractions layer we add to that, then we may get to a point where we have an optimized hardware, an optimized application, so you have a lot of waste, and maybe that's not relevant. We can say we don't care about it, but hey, there's a planet out there which has its own challenges. We are trying to deal with sustainability issues, we're trying to deal with energy efficiency, and so on. And when you do that with a few servers, or a few petabytes, maybe, okay, fine. But if you want to do that at scale, and that's regardless of the vendor you go through, when you need to operate at scale, you need to optimize. Otherwise, you're producing waste. So that's what I think about it.
So maybe the different perspective here is also, going back to that developer, because they're so out of touch with the actual hardware underneath, if the vendors don't optimize for it, then the level of inefficiency is becoming so great that maybe it does make sense for a vendor to optimize their hardware stack, knowing that there's so many layers on top of that before in this case it reaches the developer and whatever they're doing with it, that you have to, from all kinds of different perspectives, yes, e-waste, but also cost, also data center footprint, also just make it a realistic solution. Maybe that's my conclusion, my takeaway for this.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the developers, I think the right levels of abstraction hide that. Right? NVIDIA's been very good at this, right? I can write AI code that'll run on any of their GPUs because I'm using abstracted libraries. We really don't have that in the storage space necessarily to the same degree. So I mean, there's that on the developer side, and then on the just the technology side, I'm going to change my answer a little bit. I think sub $25,000 mass market storage, we don't care. And that's a place where software defined whatever can run on commodity hardware just fine. It's the edge cases, it's the high performance, where it starts to make a bigger difference.
Well, okay, let's actually continue on this discussion. I want to point at or poke at developers here. I think the reason hardware doesn't matter, in quotes, is because software developers basically, as you points out, don't really care about hardware. They care about platforms, they care about abstractions and higher level languages and higher level. And the problem is, I mean, have you considered just how powerful our systems are and how much memory and CPU cycles and everything are going to waste simply because nothing is optimized whatsoever? I mean, if you talk to database people, that's, they constantly are harping on that. Data warehouses, et cetera. I mean, they're like, there is no optimization. It's just like select all, and then, we need to have, I guess we need hardware to matter. That's what I'm trying to say. We wish it would matter. We need it to matter if we're going to be efficient.
For the mass market of databases, they agree with you. But if you talk to Oracle, they're doing hardware query accelerators. They have the X9M, which is a database machine. Vast data says we're going there, right? So at a certain level, it does, I think, begin to matter.
Yeah, I think it's probably a kind of a philosophical view on things. If you think about, and that's because we have this abundance of everything, right? If you think about how they developed the Apollo program and putting the man on the moon, they had very limited resources in terms of hardware, and yet they were able to make to realize such a feat, right? And if you think about the power that we have are available everywhere in the cloud, wherever you want to look at, we could do things absolutely incredible. I'm not saying that we would maybe develop a program to go on Mars or around Jupiter in a few days or whatever, but still, we have a lot of hardware power available, a lot of storage capacity available, and I still think that this is kind of wasted. But that's sliding away from the point about, proprietary, dedicated, optimized hardware versus commodity.
Yeah, so I'm not changing my opinion here. Maybe one of the key takeaways is maybe we should teach developers about sustainability. Maybe we should teach them about hardware. So a friend of mine used to run the vintage hardware stack, learning cloud engineers about old hardware just to give them the context. Like maybe something like that is in order to make hardware relevant in their perspective again.
That's a really interesting That's a really interesting point because essentially, if people can understand the cost of the decisions that they're making, and if those costs aren't hidden and abstracted, then maybe they would make different decisions. And in many cases, I think that the developers don't really have an opportunity to find out what the impact of their choices are because there is no pushback, there is no back pressure on their decisions.
Here's the disconnect. We're training a whole generation of developers that you shouldn't care about the hardware. You write everything in a container, and I can run it equally well on my Xeon workstation or a Graviton in the cloud with no changes. And those are very different worlds. But that's what we're telling them, and that's the promise of cloud native and containerization.
But that's very powerful. It's a very powerful message, and we're optimizing not for efficiency. We're optimizing for effectiveness of programmers.
Flexibility.
Yeah. But there's a thing though, it's because we are operating in such a mode because there is no constraint whatsoever. Nobody's imposing us from the outside that we have to operate with a certain level of efficiency. So nothing is regulated at the moment, but there may be some regulation introduced. I don't know if it's going to happen in the US, but certainly it might happen in Europe. And where is that going to happen is that it might not happen in the private data centers, but it might happen on public clouds. First, because it's the easy, low-hanging fruit. You can go in there and you can start regulating that they should not exceed a certain power efficiency. We could see, like power labels, like you have on, white appliances. And there, you could even get to a point, and I'm maybe exaggerating, where you will have to pay an extra cost. The less optimized the platform you're using, the more you're going to pay a tax, right? And that will maybe force people to rethink about what language they're using, how they're optimizing their applications, etc.
I agree. I mean, very anecdotally, a friend of mine is a Scrum Master at a large corporation in the Netherlands, and she's been doing workshops like this, just show the cost and the hidden cost of letting that VM run, letting that container run, etc. So I think regulating may be a bridge too far, but working on letting them realize their the hidden cost of all of this, I think makes sense.
So I want to pose another thought here, and I'm going to make you all agree that hardware matters. If you were an ISV, and if you live in a world where people are optimizing for programmer efficiency and abstractions and flexibility and happily giving up, making things inefficient, giving up performance, giving up capacity, giving up whatever, if you were a vendor, a product vendor in that space, there's an opportunity for you, which is to make hardware matter. In other words, to basically walk into an abstracted software-defined software world and come in with an optimized CPU, an optimized accelerator, an optimized coprocessor, whatever it is, and suddenly hardware matters a lot. Am I right?
I agree. Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I win. So let's wrap this up then. Does hardware still matter? Joep?
It depends.
Yeah, for me, definitely, and especially the more you do it at scale, the more it matters.
It matters, but not to everyone.
Yeah, and I would say so. I'd say that it depends on your perspective because it depends on what you're optimizing for. And if you need efficiency, you need power efficiency, space efficiency, high performance, then it absolutely 100% matters. If you don't need that, it absolutely doesn't. And it's probably best to focus on whatever it is that matters in this particular use case. So, well, thank you so much for this on-premises episode of the On-Premise IT Roundtable. Before we go, I just want to go around and ask you, where can we connect with you and continue this conversation?
Steve McDowell, NAND Research, NAND.com, or NAND Research on YouTube.
Max Mortillaro, or rather Massimiliano Mortillaro on LinkedIn, and I post content over there regularly.
Joep Piscaer, find me on LinkedIn or Twitter.
And I'm Stephen Foskett. You can find me on the On-Premise podcast. You can also find me at Utilizing Tech, which is our Monday podcast, and of course the weekly Wednesday Gestalt IT News Rundown. So thanks for listening to the On-Premise IT podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please do give us a rating or review. You can find us on YouTube at Gestalt IT Video. You can also find us in your favorite podcast application. And we will be sure to see you next time on the On-Premise IT Podcast.